it's time to sharpen up those edges and grease up your chains.
We are going to live it up with mountain life. Dropping in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, mountain lifers? Are you ready for it? For the holidays? Are you ready to consume? I am. I'm ready to consume some eggnog, or, as it translates from French, milk of the chicken. Delicious. But seriously, here's my annual plea for everyone to calm down over the season and just chill on the accumulation of material items and crap that you don't really need, and instead shift your focus towards the gift of an experience you can do together, or something that will make memories you can cherish forever, long after the cheap garbage that you might buy someone dries up, runs out, crashes, breaks down, ends up in the landfill. Of course, good gear that will last a long time is always awesome too. In any case, my name is Feet Banks, and this is probably the last Live It Up with Mountain Life podcast of 2024. And so, in honor of my little anti-consumerism rant off the top there, we're re-gifting this episode. Not really. It's a brand new episode, but for the first time ever on this pod, we're going to have a guest back for round 2. That's right. It's a sequel, and Frank Wolf is on the show today. It's the Re-Wolf. Frank and I are going to talk life, adventure, and the various ways to take a dump in the wilderness as we chat about his latest book, 2 Springs, 1 Summer. The book is about a trio of adventures in the Arctic, a ski trip on Baffin, a canoe journey in the Northwest Territories and on Nunavut, and another historical retracing ski trip up near the Northwest Passage in really frigid temperatures. And in that one, Frank finds himself slogging alone through the Arctic, minus 30-degree weather, with severely swollen, damaged, and painful feet, no way to protect himself from polar bears except a pocket knife, and absolutely no means to connect himself to the outside world. So in his mind, he starts imagining his own death and writes his own epitaph. And this is what he came up with. Frank was a somewhat notable person who wrote some things and made a few strange and mediocre films about esoteric outdoor subjects. Which is not wrong, but it definitely downplays a few things. Frank is a capital A adventurer. He averages 2 to 3 multi-week expeditions per year for the past 2 decades, at least. He's canoed across Canada in a single season. He's slogged around the Arctic a number of times. He's also kayaked most of the BC coast. During COVID, he circumnavigated Vancouver Island by kayak because social distancing is his absolute favorite thing to do. Frank describes the months of the year when he's not on a huge mission exploring the wild as the drudgery of existing between trips, and the drift and discontent I feel in society as compared to on a trip. So he's a bit of a loon, really, but it's the kind of person we like around here. Frank has written for Mountain Life a number of times, and I know him probably for the last 10 years at least. It's a pleasure to have him back on the Live It Up with Mountain Life podcast, so let's get into it. Frank Wolf. Yeah, so you got no beard?
Yeah, comes and goes.
Right,
so,
right.
End of the summer, I had a beard, and now I got the mustache. You know how it is.
I know how it is.
You
but you had a pretty good
before,
beard. Like
gone.
on the cover of the book. Yeah, I usually have a mustache. On the cover of the book, it's a pretty, skookum beard.
Yeah, that was never my intention to have them use that for the cover shot. I had some beautiful, shots from the field, and they decided to use my profile picture I sent them as the cover, and I said, "Oh, really?" And then people seem to like it, so we went with it. Yeah.
It looks like a guy who's been out on a long trip. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. How is that for you when you have an idea about how the book might potentially look or the cover, and then usually the publishers have a totally different idea?
Yeah, that's fine. Like at first I had it like nicely laid out with I think Johnny was my buddy who's Whistler guy who was skiing over that penny ice cap. He was in the corner, had the beautiful mountain, would have been perfect with the title, I thought, but then they had a totally different idea. And I said, I'll just pass it around to people that I trust as far as have a good eye for this sort of thing. And they all thought, yeah, that's the better choice. So I said, all right.
Yeah, I mean, there must be some science behind it about having a face on the cover. So congratulations. Second book.
Second book.
The first one was a bunch of sort of essays, and this one is a more of a cohesive about 3 trips, 2 springs, 1 summer,
Yeah,
three
kind of like a
trips.
long form narrative type book
Yeah.
instead of magazine stories, more or less like the other one.
Yeah. Last time we talked, you're the first guest we've ever done a
Part
second
two,
pod with
baby.
so far. So
Part
yeah,
two.
this is the Rewolf.
Yeah, the
Um,
Rewolf.
last time we talked, I think you had gone on one or two of those trips, but not the third one or something. I think you had done the ski trip in the over the
Yeah,
ice cap.
I think last time I talked to you, it might have been these trips might have happened before then. These trips all happened 2018, 19.
Okay, so yeah, I
Uh,
think we
we
talked
talked,
after Vancouver Island, so it must have been.
yeah, it must have been 2022, 2021 or
So
so.
how is that? I mean, you take a journal every night, but what was it like going back into these trips that are, 6 years old now? How was it tricky to get back into the space and capture the journey like you did?
Yeah, well, I'd kind of roughly written this book a couple of years ago, just didn't like it, put it away, and then I kind of revisited it, and then I saw more potential once I kind of put it away. So
Right.
yeah, I just kind of cut it down, made it a bit more focused, and yeah, once I revisited, I thought, oh, actually, there is something there, and then I just went for it. So yeah, I just kind of it's something, and I think because that in it's basically 3 journeys that happen in the course of 10 months. They're also all in the Arctic, so it's very
Yeah.
kind of Arctic themed, and each trip was very different as far as like the team dynamic. Three very different teams, 3 different kind of objectives, and 3 different kind of outcomes in a way too. So it was just kind of a good contrast between the three journeys, and how you kind of you make it work with different people every time or not work, and then just see where it goes, right? So
Totally. And I mean, for the listeners that don't have the book in their hand like I do, so the first one was a 280-kilometer ski expedition across Baffin Island. And then the summer trip was 1,750-kilometer canoe trip through Northwest Territories and Nunavut.
yeah,
And then the final one was a 550 ski trip retracing a historical expedition
that's
in the
right,
Arctic. So
exactly.
when you finish those 3 trips or when you're putting that together, did you be like, yeah, these actually, they all go together? I see, an arc or whatever that you thought would be good for the book or
Yeah, I mean, I've done like a lot of trips. I did like 3 trips this year in the span of like 5 months, I think,
right.
which could be another book, I guess. But
Yeah. Did
yeah, I
something
think
stand
this,
out about these three that you're like, oh yeah, no,
yeah,
this could be
I
it?
guess the one thing is me one trip, the third one was it was I had to pull off because my feet went off, and so it's actually you get a good story out of quote unquote failure more so than you do of success. So it's all like machine like success all the way through. You don't really learn a lot of lessons when you kind of
Yeah.
cruise through a trip. So the first one, the Johnny and Dave, was like super smooth, easy going, great team dynamic. Everything worked out great on that trip. So that's kind of one way of looking at it. And with Ryan, it was a trip. Kind of did a couple of changes on the fly in the course of the journey. Ryan and I didn't see eye to eye as much, but in terms of like succeeding and getting to the end, it was still an awesome trip that way. And then the third one is again 2 people I didn't know at all really, and then just kind of the dynamic was decent, but then my body kind of failed me as well. So each one kind of has a different,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of lesson and different kind of aesthetic and dynamic. And I also wanted to do it all sequentially within the course of 10 months to kind of just show people kind of the ups and downs of doing these kind of committing your life to doing these long, passionate journeys. It's not always like fun and games and everything's amazing. It's a lot of like, there's downs in the ups, the kind of time between the trips is often more difficult than the trips themselves, just because because I find so much purpose and joy from these journeys. When in between, it's almost like it's hard to grasp that purpose in the kind of the fallow time between the journeys, right? So trying to kind of come to terms with that, but sharing that with people as well, right? And just showing that everyone has some sort of struggles or drift in the course of
Yeah.
their life, no matter who you are or what you're doing, right?
And
So
I think that's the meat of the book, where it really kicks into gear is in the second trip where,
mhm.
things aren't going perfect and
Yeah.
you've got your buddy's using his phone on the trip, right? And listening to podcasts and stuff. And that's in your book, you talk about, your how that kind of takes you out of the experience.
Hmm.
Um, and then in the third trip, you do the same thing. So it's
Exactly. I mean,
yeah, and they're very different trips, right?
there's different, and there's contradictions. I think there's contradictions in everyone's life. If I acted in the second trip like I did in the third trip, then I would be a complete hypocrite, right? But
Yeah.
it's also like being on a canoe trip, especially. I've been doing these long, wilderness journeys for so long. It's really my happy place. And the third one was kind of a trip that I was brought on to photograph and write about. And we actually got paid to do the trip as well. So you kind of like almost doing it more as a job, but the day to day, it was a pretty benign, a monotonous landscape.
Yeah,
So
just
kind of,
slogging across the
yeah,
ice.
just kind of slogging. It'd be like, imagine something like slogging to Antarctica. You just head down and it's the same every day, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I use the crutch of podcasts and that sort of
And
thing on that one
was that
too.
the
And it's kind
first
of like,
time? Was that the
yeah,
first time you'd ever done that?
what's that?
Was that the first time you'd taken a phone and plugged in on your trips?
Yeah, it wasn't even like an iPod, like old school,
Right.
like spin wheel iPod, the kind of battery life forever. But
Right.
the only other time I done it was a similar kind of thing when we were trying to row the Northwest Passage, and my view was basically the back, like the cabin of the rowboat we were in,
Right.
and a bit of a subtle view to a dead flat landscape on either side of me. And that was the other time I did kind of listening to kind of audiobooks and stuff like that, because I might as well have been in like a room somewhere. There's
Totally.
no
Yeah, on
no
a rowing
view.
machine.
You're just kind of like in a Viking ship, like a slave in the galley kind of thing. So those two trips are the only time I've kind of used that use something to distract me from where I'm being. And if you look on it reflectively, it's like maybe you shouldn't do a trip like that if it's just to get to the end rather than the enjoyment of ideally a trip like my canoe trips. It's always like every moment I'm there, I'm present. But if you need to be taken out of your present because you're not enjoying it, then probably wasn't the best choice of a trip. But once you're on the trip, you got to make the best of it in whatever way you can, right? So,
Right. Right.
mhm.
Do you ever find, I mean, you talk about you write, you read books. Do you ever find that a book pulls you out of the experience in the way that you would fear that the technology does for your partners?
Yeah, I think the books I select usually are kind of books that are almost try to be somewhat complementary to the journey, almost like
Right.
reading about people in similar situation. Often it's like a nonfiction, or in the case of the trip with Ryan, I read the Orenda, which is kind of like a fictional historical fiction about indigenous people in the 1600s during first contact and stuff like that. And yeah, so that kind of fit the landscape and what we were doing on that
Right.
journey.
So you're not taking like escapist fairy porn out there.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not doing like Game of Thrones, the
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
thing or anything like that. It's definitely more kind of like nonfiction that kind of was somewhat relatable to the journey. Yeah.
You've been doing these kind of big trips more than half your life, and you've got your system pretty dialed,
Hmm.
and there is almost a bit of a sense of rigidity when somebody doesn't fall in line to your way. Do you battle with that on the trip? Like, do you find yourself getting angry at somebody for, not bringing the extra pair of boxer briefs, or not even knowing that you need boxer briefs, or
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as basically when I'm on a journey, I'm basically in service to that journey, and whatever makes that journey work best is what should be happening. And just through my experience, I'm the 30 years of doing these kind of, in 1995, I canoed across Canada, 6 months in the canoe, and that kind of, started me off. And ever since then, I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I've gained experience through it. And generally, my partners, I let them kind of do what they want as long as it doesn't interfere with the course or the progress of the journey, right? So there's
yeah,
always gonna be things that kind of bother you, and if you're with the person 24/7, sometimes it isn't always, you're not always seeing 100% eye to eye, of course. But also I think sometimes just I can suggest based on a lot of experience what someone should be doing or maybe should try,
yeah,
because I know if they don't do it, it's the wrong thing. Especially my kind of trips are kind of like you've got X amount of food, you have this much dishes to cover, the only way out is the other side, and you have to keep on moving every single day, because at some point the wind's going to come in and stop you, or something in the land is going to slow you down, and you have to kind of bank kilometers when you can, take advantage of conditions all the time. Don't just say, oh, it's a nice day today, let's just take it off. The next day you've got a windstorm pinning you down for the day. So you have to kind of keep on top of it in bank days if you can, because at some point the north wind's going to come in and stop you. Usually on the trip with Ryan, it didn't. It didn't until towards the end. So that was a very surprising based on my experience. But yeah, so
yeah.
kind of
Or
yeah,
if it's not the north wind, it's the ice, or it's always something
exactly. It's
usually, right?
something that's going to kind of, and you have to kind of take all this stuff into account, and then usually you don't want to get into yeah, you try to be subtle, and basically I always try to look big picture. Okay, we're still moving along well. The trip's still going ahead. We're on track, blah, blah, blah. So as long as that is, you have to kind of keep in perspective as long as that's happening. But yeah, just trying to, I do have a thing about being as efficient as possible on trip. It's probably my Teutonic German heritage, right? This kind of, this is the way you kind of move along in a trip. And I apply it, and I'm so consumed by the journey. It's kind of like, it's all and everything. So definitely, and I say that in the book too. I kind of reflect. I'm being a bit petty. I'm being a dick to Ryan, and I admit that as well along the way.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm just kind of honest about where I am at the whole at that point in the day. And I try to like I think a lot of people write books and they don't want to offend the people that they've done the trip with, so they don't actually tell the whole story along the way.
Yeah.
That's part of it. So I tried to be, I mean, fair to my partners, but also express what I was actually feeling and not kind of hide that or sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
And
Has there
that's
been any bounce back
fair.
from trip partners about that?
Not from trip partners. I mean, I've had already some, some people might say, "Oh, you're being pretty hard on." Another trip partner of mine. He was a musician, Pearson, wonderful guy, but I had to kind of lay down the law on him pretty hard because he was, you know, giving me the wrong stroke at the wrong time, dangerously putting the canoe in an
Right.
exposed situation in rapids and kind of, and he's such a nice guy, and his feelings get hurt easily, and I felt terrible doing, but I had to kind of like lay it down on him. But that's the way it goes sometimes, right? So
Yeah.
it's
And
definitely,
I
it's never meant to be hurtful to that person or get personal with that person. It's more about this person is not doing the best he or she can for the journey right now, and if you're not
yeah.
in service to the journey, then there's a bit of a problem. So yeah.
Generally people will defer to your expertise, you would think, or
Yeah, I think in on canoe trips for
yeah.
sure. Generally, I mean, and some people just have a certain personality. Like I knew with Ryan, great guy, but he has a natural rebelliousness and a bit of a button pushing mentality,
Yeah.
and he's good at it. So that definitely that's all part of it, and you kind of see that over time.
And how militant do you get? I know I was on a trip going up the Chilcotin River with a buddy who has a lot
yeah,
more experience in the wilderness than me, and it was
yeah,
me and another guy and him in one tent with the one night. And
yeah,
he said, "Listen, you guys, if I get up in the middle of the night and the two zippers aren't at the top of the door, there's going to be hell to pay, right?" And I mean that does make sense. If you know exactly where the zipper is going to be, then you always know where it is.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Like he was very militant about it. Like, do you go to that level, or is it a bit?
Not really. I don't really lay down the law like that. I more like lead by example, and hopefully the person will follow along. That's generally how it is.
Yeah,
So, and if something that is, it's not, if it's not done the way I'm used to doing it, then I'll say, well, how come you're doing it that way? What makes it better? We can always have a conversation about why you're doing that
yeah,
or
yeah. You
that.
could always learn
And I'll just
something
say, well,
new.
I do it this way because of this. And
Yeah.
then, but if that works for you, that's fine too. So,
So over the years, dozens of trips, you've amassed a lot of tricks, right? And
yeah,
there's quite a few in this book, whether it's, using the Aeroplan miles
that's
because
right.
they go by distance rather than value, or
Exactly.
you
Within the
know,
country. Yeah.
um the different paddles that you would use for the different parts of the trip,
Yeah.
or like, do you have should we be doing a mountain life article that's just like Frank's tips and tricks for the wild, or like
Not
do you have
necessarily. A
most of that?
lot of people maybe be miserable the way I do it. It's like, you know, oatmeal in the morning,
Yeah.
tortillas with like peanut butter and honey, and then like freeze dried food. Like the menu plan is awful probably to most people, right?
It
But
sounds pretty
it's
grim. Like that
yeah,
oatmeal every single morning would get
yeah,
old on a 60-day trip.
yeah. But I guess on a trip where you have a limited amount of food, that kind of food tastes really good on trip to me, and it works well, and it's light and it's quick.
Yeah,
So it's definitely more about, food is definitely fuel on trip. You're not out for, I'm not out there to have a nice Dutch oven pizza kind of thing, right? So
totally.
it's
It's,
definitely more
it's funny
about,
because my
yeah,
biggest trip this year was a 6-day hike in the
yeah,
Yukon, which,
hmm,
to you, a 6-day hike, we spoke about it before. You really need 2 weeks to
sure,
disconnect from the old world, but
that, yeah,
6-day
yeah,
hike's still pretty good for
hmm,
me anyhow. I don't have maybe quite the same spirit as you, but it was with this company Terra Boreal in Yukon, and they
yeah,
freeze dry their own food,
awesome.
or dehydrate their own food. So they'll make their own lasagnas and then dehydrate it, and yeah, it was really good, better I think than the
Oh
bagged
yeah,
food.
totally. I think people that take the time, and I'm probably lazy that way. I don't do the food drying thing myself, and in terms of like the time and patience to prepare And
Yeah.
I mean, you can ask my wife. I'm definitely not. I'm a good sous chef, but I'm not a really good,
Right.
master of cuisine in the kitchen. But yeah, I went on a trip in 2023 myself and 3 others. We kayaked around the Labrador Peninsula, and then Justine Kurgenvin, who's a well-known expedition paddler, we did half the meals freeze dried, but half the meals were her meals, and that she all meticulously
Right.
pre-made and freeze dried, and they're awesome, like
Yeah.
really nice, like chilies and all
I
these
think a
different
lot of
kinds
people
of
don't
like,
realize that you
yeah,
can do that if you have the time.
totally. You can
Yeah.
make an amazing meal if you do it. Take the time to
Yeah.
dry it and hydrate it yourself. So, but for me, I kind of do things pretty quick, and it's like I get them organized just kind of the most efficient way possible, kind of like how the trips are going. And it's yeah, that's kind of how I go about it. So, and that's why it's often good for me to do trips with people who've never done trips before. So I rarely have done canoe trips with other canoe trippers. I'll often go with like a mountaineer or someone who has the kind of ability to be uncomfortable in the wild for long periods of time, but also they don't have a preconceived notion about how to do something.
Yeah.
So as far as they know, the way I'm doing it is the way everyone does it, and that's perfect because they don't have any context, right? And that's kind of so. Most of my trip partners have not really been like the guy did a 1,350K canoe trip from Yellowknife up to Kugluktuk this summer, and he was 24, had never done a canoe trip in his life before, but he's kind of a skateboarder and skier, backcountry skier, so he had the kind of the physical skills and mental attitude, and we got along great. And he just thought this is how it is. This
Yeah.
is how
Yeah.
canoe trips are, because this is the only canoe trip he's ever done, right? So yeah.
Well, the skateboarders are the toughest of anyone.
Totally, yeah.
Another one of your tricks was, download the maps, right? The government has free maps,
That's
topos
right.
of the whole country,
Exactly.
and you would download them, print them out. In the old days, those were expensive. But
Totally,
on
yeah,
this
yeah.
canoe trip, you guys had to kind of raw dog it a bit with a hand-drawn map at one point.
Yeah, well, I'd originally planned to do this different route up this river called the Kalit, which flows into or is just over a divide from the back river. Then it goes all the way up to this narrows in the Northwest Passage. Then would be a quick like 15-kilometer crossing to get to King William Island, where Joe Haven is. And so I kind of envisioned this kind of route to kind of get all the way to Joe Haven under our own power. But then as we're going along, kind of said all the feeder creeks were dry as a bone. So, and there's a pretty shallow river, the Cleat. I knew that. So we'd probably have just like a boneyard of several hundred kilometers, which would be kind of a no-go. So then, and also then as we're going along the back river, and I kind of said, well, let's just get to the end and figure it out. And I'd had a chance meeting with this older Australian couple that I helped on the Pikes Portage to carry some of their stuff. And they were originally planning to go to the back river, but they changed their mind because they got backed up by the ice for too long. And they said, oh yeah, there's usually Inuit that'll be there at the mouth of the back river, and we'll just like bump into someone and get them to kind of call us in a boat or something. And I thought, okay, let's go with that plan. Let's hope there's going
Yeah.
to be somebody there, right? And then there was in the end somebody there, like just by happening to bump into someone and get the idea. And then as we're going along, it was much more satisfying to do a river source to sea like I've done before than to cut off part way and go a different way just to get up to King William Island.
And so you had you looked at the maps and drew it out.
So
Did it go well? Was there any issues with navigation without that added benefit of the official 50,000 to ones?
uh yeah, it was okay. Like we were on a river. It's a big wide river, and there's obviously some kind of lakey bits, but and in particular, it kind of gave us a little bit more information about the rapids. But one thing about once you're on a river, a guidebook to rapids doesn't really help you much, anyways, because depending on water level, a rapid is
Right.
completely different. It could be like flooded over and smooth, or it could be really low, and then there's rapids where there aren't usually rapids, or you can get side rapids. So once we were on it and could see it with our own eyes, this is kind of a general guideline to where we wanted to end up, and that worked well enough to get us through this kind of like trickier section at the end that we had no maps of whatsoever. So, and that's kind of fun. It's kind of like what the original explorers or indigenous people, they never had maps, right? They just kind of
Yeah.
through the land and would feel their way down. And that's kind of like tapping into that kind of ancient way of travel, which is really cool too.
You talk a little bit about, that singularity with the land that the old explorers or the old indigenous cultures would have. And
Yeah.
then you talk a little bit about how a lot of the indigenous communities that you get into less and less of them are having that
Oh,
because
absolutely, yeah,
they travel they just fly places, or they're not spending as much time on as much of their land
for
as they
sure, yeah,
used to. But then you also said that they look at a guy like you just walking with no real purpose
yeah, yeah,
across the ice as kind of like a
yeah. What are you doing?
yeah, they get
Yeah, so
confused. Why would
like,
anyone do that?
yeah, and I think in a lot of ways when you're out there canoeing, and the indigenous folks meet you, they're like, oh, they're actually impressed because you're doing things that their ancestors did, especially traveling on the rivers and stuff like that. Under your own power, like they would use kayaks and canoes and that sort of thing, and now they're using motorboats. But on the other hand, when we were on the other trip, the John Ray trip, when we were doing skiing up to the Northwest Passage, retracing John Ray's route, where he discovered that everyone in the Franklin expedition had died. We basically ran into a group of Inuit who were going up this river to check their nets to get the char and salmon because it's so expensive to live in these remote communities there. They do still subsist largely on char and seal and hunting and living off the land. And the only reason they're out there, like they love comfort as much as anyone. They like heated homes. They're very much, they're part of modern society. They have internet, all that sort of stuff, right? So they're out there for a purpose. They're out there in -40 because they got to get fish. And to
Yeah,
see just a few guys like us just kind of being out there for no reason other than to do something that was done a couple hundred years earlier by some other white dude, it's kind of like it just was baffled them a little bit, right? So what do I'm out here to fish for my family. What are you doing out here, right? He was
yeah,
just, the one guy in particular, he was just kind of a bit aghast at what we're doing, and it kind of made me reflect a bit on it. Yeah, I said, yeah, I could see how this could be, kind of stupid. Even going over the penny ice cap, none of the indigenous people, you can't talk to them about what's up on the penny ice cap because they don't go on the penny ice cap. There's nothing to hunt on the penny ice cap. All the seals and bears and caribou, whatever, they're all going to be down along the coastlines and in the waterways, right? So for them, there's no practical reason for them to go up on an ice cap because there's nothing there to hunt, and it's just a detour for no reason, right? So they still are very much grounded in practicality, and that's also why they don't use dog teams anymore. That's why they don't use self-propelled means. It's more efficient and faster for them to get around with the snowmobile. It's better for them to have a heated home that they don't have to kind of constantly move to get their food, and I had a good conversation with the former premier of the Northwest Territories, this guy Peter, who I met in Kugluktuk a couple of years ago, and he said he was there. He was an indigenous guy. He's the premier for 9 years, and he said, "Yeah, like we don't want to go back to the old ways. We like heated homes. We like modern conveniences. We still want to keep aspects of our culture, but we also want to move ahead and with modern society like everyone else. So it's
yeah,
not like they're going to ever go back, and they're kind of they're very practical in what they do, which I really appreciate. Like the indigenous people in general, they're just very practical people, and they kind of roll with things like climate change and things sort of thing much better than we do. They just kind of deal with what's in front of them, right? And so that's something I appreciate. It made me reflect along the way when you meet these people out there and get their perspective. It kind of but you basically stop for a second and kind of reflect on what exactly you're doing out there sometimes.
yeah. And on that third trip, the slog where you
Mhm.
embrace the technology and ultimately had to pull off because of your feet. Has that ever happened before where you've had such an issue with your feet like that? Because it sounded pretty heinous.
Yeah, no, it was, yeah, I did not have any kind of issue like that's kind of a one-off, something just triggered in my feet. Yeah, I tested on my footwear pretty well before. Yeah, it's kind of, I think it was a couple of days of basically in my kind of lightweight boots, tromping around on crampons. Something triggered in the balls of my feet, and then the
Right.
feet just kind of blew right up, so I could barely even get them in the boots anymore. And just kind of crawling around camp by the end of the trip, right?
And
So
it's -30, -40 while you're
yeah,
doing this,
exactly.
which is
So it was just
crazy.
kind of
Like,
like I could see myself definitely, 2/3 of the way through the trip, a third of the way to go, and just kind of hobbling around. I didn't want to be a detriment to the journey. So that's another way you can be of service to the journey, is to step off and let the two guys continue and finish the job, which is what Richard and David did.
yeah.
And so yeah, I was in this that sense the journey was a success. They got to where they wanted to get to, and then I didn't get to be a part of it. But then that's something you kind of accept out there in those situations. So
you mentioned how that trip was put together by like the other team members,
Yeah, yeah.
and there was some difficulties with the gear.
Hmm.
Like it must be frustrating when you show up on a trip, on a job in this case, but still
Yeah,
on a trip that is, potentially life-threatening
sure.
conditions. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
definitely life-threatening conditions when it's -40 in the Arctic.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
you've got a crappy sleeping bag, or,
Hmm. Hmm.
your jacket's not the right size, or
Yeah.
um did you learn, like, do you, if that happens again, or if it has happened again, do you like demand to at least do a Zoom call and oversee the gear that you're supposed to be saddled with, or
Yeah, I mean the guy David who organized, he definitely had a lot of experience with Arctic kind of stuff. And it's kind of like I didn't know I had the wrong size jacket and stuff until I showed up the day before the trip and he had everything. And he said, "Oh,
yeah,
sorry, didn't this is what you get." And it's at
yeah.
that point you kind of deal with it. It was kind of too late to and I think he got a lot of things last minute as well. I mean, the one thing with there's some people on journeys, they're kind of like they're there for the post trip glory, but they're not really there to enjoy the journey itself, which is kind of
Right.
my priority. Is my thing is always like if I'm in a trip and if all the camera gear goes down the downstream and is lost in a rapid or whatever, as long as the journey gets completed, then that's the main thing. So you're out there for the trip and the journey itself, and then the coverage and kudos and anything that might come from it. Usually there's nothing like that, is kind of an afterthought. So it's kind of like, but other people do things for, sometimes they do it just for the almost a bit of self-aggrandizement and kind of to be kind of patted on the back rather than to do it for the journey
Did
itself.
you ever catch yourself doing it that way when you were younger? I know I definitely have been spanked by thinking about the photo on the summit before you're even on the wall, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
did that ever happen to you, or did you get it figured out pretty early on?
Yeah, I think I definitely got spanked. Like in the first chapter of the on the lines in the map book is like, I got washed down the Babine River trying to push through the first west to east, and I was just all hubris and ego, uh, not kind of just overly confident because I really didn't know what I was into until I got my ass kicked, right? So and then you if you get your ass kicked a few times early on and you're kind of traveling or journeying, then as long as you don't die, hopefully you learn from those experiences and you get better
Yeah.
and more respectful and more efficient in those kind of things, and you come in more prepared and realizing more what you're getting into than that. And that was definitely more about it was more like we wanted to do the goal, but it wasn't about the journey as much. When you
Yeah,
lose
yeah.
sight of the journey and the goal overtakes what the journey is, then yeah, if you're looking months ahead on a trip and you want it to be at the end, then you shouldn't be there anymore, basically. And you have to kind of realize that. So
Yeah.
the journeys I do now, it's like that ones that I planned, it's something that I really want to do, and it's something that I really love, and it's something while I'm on it, it's just it's an amazing, simple, immersive kind of experience that can't be replicated in day-to-day life, and that's one of the amazing things about these kind of wilderness journeys.
And I think that mindset and that, being present, it's especially important in the mountains.
For
You need
sure.
to pay
Yeah.
attention to the snow. There's danger. Same with a river, right? If you don't know when the next rapid is, or um, is there a part? I know you love canoeing. You kind of do everything, but is there, like, you've been to the Arctic a lot? Is there something about the North that keeps drawing you back?
Yeah, I think especially northern Canada. I mean, this year I also did a trip with Mark Sky. We kayaked around the Darien Gap, and so kind of like that's kind of a. But anywhere you go in the South, like in the Caribbean or the South America, whatever, there's kind of people everywhere, and anytime there's people in the country you're going through, you have to kind of respect the way they do things, and that kind of takes away a bit from the freedom of the experience too, right?
Right.
So one thing about northern Canada, Northwest Territories, Nunavut, you're lucky if you see like 3 or 4 or 5 people in the course of a month. So it's just you and the animals, and it's such a free way to be. There's no one telling you what to do. You're kind of in charge of your destiny, and it's just this absolute freedom, which is the beauty of it, and that's what Canada offers. And there's nowhere that's as remote or as kind of wide open with that many possibilities as the Canadian wilderness and the Arctic in particular. I mean, Nunavut is like 30,000 people in the entire territory, way
Yeah.
bigger than Alaska. Northwest Territories, 30,000 people. Yukon, 30,000 people. There's like less than like 100,000 people in all the Canadian territories. And so it's such a, almost like it's the last frontier in terms of what the world has, basically. So,
Yeah, I was gonna say, at any given on any given winter weekend, there's more people on Whistler Blackcomb than in
oh,
the entire
absolutely.
Northwest Territories, right? Or the
Totally.
entire Nunavut, which is
Yeah.
crazy to think
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Exactly.
because
So
they're
yeah,
huge.
it has that unique, it's kind of guarded by its remoteness. It's guarded by the heinous bugs. It's guarded by the cold in the winter. So there's all these kind of uncomfortable aspects to it that probably keep people away. But if you're willing to kind of take the time and immerse yourself in it in a simple way by skiing or canoeing or kayaking, the rewards are, endless.
Do you ever get immune to the bugs? Like I know you
Uh,
guys talk about wearing your bug hats and stuff, but is it true that some like you just get bit so many times that it doesn't bother you anymore?
Yeah, I think it's a you kind of avoid getting bitten as well. I mean, this summer we did during our trip, myself and Arturo, my buddy who I did it with, for the first 3 weeks it was extremely hot. So it was like just the black flies were through the roof. It just energizes, and black flies and horse flies, in droves. So we just, even in 30 degrees, we had to be completely covered up, and you just kind of get used to it being covered up, working with the bugs. And it's almost like when they go away, it's almost like there's something missing. It becomes, you get used to that kind of constant harassment. And I appreciate them in some way. They don't let you linger. That, you keep on,
Right.
don't need to linger when these bugs are here. Let's keep on moving forward, keep on. So they kind of drive you, they whip you like little taskmasters, and actually help the journey in the end too. So yeah, and they're just part of it. And then we do have that nice breezy day and they're not there, you really appreciate it too, right? So the bugs do provide you with amazing perspective out there. Yeah.
Do you ever get the urge to just, stay out and not come back and just, uh, live in the woods and build a cabin from scratch like that guy on TV when we were kids, Dick Prenicky?
Oh, that's right. Alone in the Wilderness. Yeah.
Yeah, great show. I mean, you must have watched that when you were
Of
younger, Alone in the
course.
Wilderness. I
I've
think
got
that
I've got a
was,
DVD of that at the cottage. So
yeah,
like we have a cottage in Northern Ontario, about 3 hours north of Toronto. So I'll spend like a good month there after my kind of tripping season, mid August to mid September. But also it's like, it's interesting with these journeys, like you could say, well, if you love it so much, why don't you just keep on, wilderness tripping 365 days of the year? But then that would normalize too, right? So kind of
right,
almost like the mission, the mission, like finite mission in terms of you have a start point and an end point, and that's it. It really makes you appreciate that 30 to 45 or 50 days you're out there and you're fully into it all the time.
right.
If you were just to do that 365 days a year, then it just becomes almost like, it would become monotonous. It would become everyday life. It would become a little less special. So you need those kind of almost these little times of fallow, these kind of recharge times.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's like
balance. I mean, in the book, you call it the drudgery of existing between trips.
exactly.
So,
But and
or
that drudgery is important though. It's almost like if you're if you're an artist, you're not always at a high level of creation where you're doing these amazing paintings that just, they're just pouring out of you every day. You have these kind of, you get kind of stumped, you get kind of low, you get kind of burnt out from doing art. And that kind of period of stopping, even though you're not in your fully idealized world at that point, that kind of time of kind of downtime is required to kind of shoot up again into the next mission or into the next kind of piece of art. It's kind of like you need that kind of that beat between,
yeah,
even though you're not having the greatest time, you don't realize in the back of your head that's where things are starting to kind of roll again, and eventually you'll get out again. But you need that kind of, you need the darkness and the light. You can't just have all light, because then it'll turn to all dark, right?
yeah, yeah, balance. Who knew,
Yeah,
right? Balance.
exactly. Yeah.
Going back to Dick Prenicky, I think it'd be interesting to do a poll of like, I guess Canadian adventures. Maybe they had the same shows in the States. I'm not sure, but how many of them grew up like drawn to Dick Prenicky, Alone in the Wilderness, and also Bob Ross, right? And those
Yeah,
endless landscapes that he would paint in front of your face in 21 minutes. But
that's right.
that was what we had back then.
Exactly.
Um,
No. Dick Prenicky is definitely an amazing story. It was always like on the PBS PBS kind of membership drives. They'd always play that every time, right? That was
Yeah.
like their most popular show. So
That was the first really binging that I can remember ever doing. Is it'd just be that show all day one day.
that's it. That's it.
Uh, Speaking of those drudgery and monotony of regular life in between trips,
Yeah.
one thing I learned about you and it makes sense, but you hate weddings.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you never have to go to them because you're always gone in the summer.
Exactly. I wouldn't say I hate weddings, but they kind of are to kind of key your summer around basically, you know, I don't know, a bit of a vacuous party, I suppose. It's all kind of sizzle, no steak. It's just kind of it's parties are great, but it's kind of like uh, yeah, the wedding itself, it just seems like it's a whole lot of like pomp and circumstance. It's not a lot of substance, and I'm just not
Right.
into that sort of thing. So yeah.
But did you have a wedding yourself?
No,
All right, you're not married. You just had the
no.
same
I'm kind of like
partner.
West Coast married.
Yeah.
common law. So
It's a new world out here.
it is exactly. Yeah. So I think most of my friends are similarly, married,
Yeah.
but not no ceremony. Yeah, no ceremony. Yeah.
We spoke about the value of a understanding partner on the last pod. Obviously, that's still going well, which is excellent.
Yeah.
I think one of the more sensationalist parts of this book for some people is they'll learn that you don't use toilet paper on your
That's
trips.
right. Exactly.
Which I think a lot of people, there have been whole books written about how to shit in the woods, but I think that'll probably set a lot of people back. They can't conceive it. So I want to go into that a little bit. Like,
yeah, for sure.
has it always been that way, or was there a point when you decided that's it? I'm not doing toilet paper.
I think when my kind of my job between university years was in the summer time was tree planting and canoe tripping, and pretty quickly I decided, I'd seen enough, say canoe tripping and stuff in Temagami as a guide, this bleached white paper kind of just tossed off on the side in the woods to know that I didn't want to be part of it.
Nothing ruins a landscape like that, right?
That is, and then it's almost like then you reflect on it. Well, what did people use for thousands and thousands of years, right? And there are just lots of great alternatives, and they work just as well. And you just kind of blend it back into the landscape that way. So be it like a nice sphagnum moss or a smooth pebble stone, leaves.
Sometimes it's a handful of snow, though.
Yeah, sometimes it's like often if you're in the Arctic, you have this kind of very much a styrofoam snow. It's like hard packed, like wind packed snow.
Right.
And if you can break it apart, it breaks into these perfect little triangles, which work great to kind of do the business you need done. And then
my buddy Chili used to swear by the pine cone, right? Go the right direction.
The pine cone, exactly. Get a nice sized pine cone, as long as you rub it the right way, with the grain, not against the grain.
I'm telling you, this could be a whole article in itself, really.
Exactly. But it's interesting. I did a trip this summer, and we had this incident where this wolf came into our camp, hung out for like 7 or 8 minutes, and then it hopped behind the ridge, and we filmed the whole thing. And he discovered my dump that morning. It was a huge, glorious like cow patty I laid down, and it was kind of rock hard, permafrost. I covered it with like moss and sand and stuff like that. That's kind of all I can do. But the wolf will just ferret it out no matter what. And then the wolf proceeded to joyfully, like for 5 minutes, roll in my shit, like for 5 minutes. And the wolf turned from like this light, kind of a white gray color into a full-on brown matted color, and then just like pranced happily away. And so when I put it on the internet, it's not like people are saying, well, why did the wolf roll in the shit? It's more like, dude, you didn't bury your shit. Dude, you didn't bury your shit. What are you doing, man? And they thought I was like in the Hood River in Oregon, and not the Hood River in the Northwest in
right.
And then it becomes this people on the internet attacking each other, read the captions. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. It's quite funny to watch.
I'm pretty sure hell is people on the internet, but
exactly. But most of it, it's like, it's commentary about my shit, which is surprising, but there we go. People get,
we've all seen dogs rolling in shit, rolling in dead salmon, right? Wolves are dogs, right?
Exactly.
So that's what they do. One thing I guess I'm sure you're aware, a lot of people aren't though, in those northern landscapes that in that earth, it doesn't have the enzymes and the earthworms because it's frozen, right? So actually burying your shit, it's going to be there longer.
Exactly. If you leave it on the surface, then an animal will come and take care of it, or the wind or water or whatever, wash it and distribute it, right? So if you bury it, it's like creating a fossil of your own shit, basically.
My kid has dinosaur shit fossil upstairs. Let's see. I've got a couple notes here. I'm definitely interested in you. You talk a lot about your canoe that you used on that
Yes.
trip, and it's
Mhm.
you know, picking the canoe for the trip, but also you have to carry that thing on your head.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So how much does that canoe weigh? Talk about that canoe a little bit for
Yeah.
people.
The canoe, it's kind of the only, basically, whitewater canoes for years were made out of something called Royal X, which is a product made by DuPont. It's like a ABS with 2 layers of ABS with foam in between. So kind of a light material that would slide over rocks. But then DuPont stopped making these sheets, and Royal X canoes kind of disappeared. But my canoe sponsor is Skiff. They're in Quebec, and they're either going to go out of business or figure out a way to make their own sheets. So they made these sheets. Basically, it's more or less Royal X called T-Formex, and same thing, it's relatively light, but virtually indestructible. And in terms of the kind of canoe, if I'm going to be in a trip the way I do, upstream, downstream, dragging over dry rocks, dragging it across the tundra behind you on a tether, all these sort of things that really abuse the canoe, I tend towards something that's super durable and functional and great in whitewater versus something that's going to be a little bit lighter on the portages. So this canoe is like 76 pounds, empty, but then I'll often strap paddles in there too. So it'll get
Yeah.
up towards 90 pounds by the time I've got it all loaded up.
And
And
you portage it yourself, right? It's not a
yep,
two-man job.
exactly. Yeah. It's better if you have two people on a canoe over rough ground. It's like this terrible push and pull. You're just not going to get anywhere, and it's going to be pretty frustrating. So one person with the canoe is just a lot more efficient.
Yeah.
In the tundra, often you can glide them behind you. If you click onto it, like onto a harness on your on your pack, you can just kind of have it glide behind you and kind of where there's no trees at all. But sometimes you gotta slug it out. But I'd rather have that than something lightweight that's going to crack on a rock and then you're stuck with a major repair in the middle of the wilderness, right? So
Yeah.
yeah. So these canoes, I mean, I use them probably for they've given me 11 canoes now, and I've left them at the end of the journeys because it's more expensive to get a canoe out of these areas than it is to
Yeah, I like that. Often
exactly.
you'll gift the canoe or
Yeah.
sell it for a deal to one of the people, the local
Yeah, I'll
people
give
where
it
you
to
end
the
up.
local school, or I'll sell it for some beer money to some local who it would cost them 10 times as much to get a canoe in the community. And then they end up using it for like, caribou hunting and fishing and all that sort of thing. So I kind of so that I've got in 11 different remote communities in Canada, in Nunavut, Northern Ontario, Northern Manitoba, that sort of thing. My canoes are scattered about. So,
Awesome.
but still being used in these
Yeah.
areas by
Yeah.
people who
Perfect.
are living there. So yeah,
Win-win.
exactly.
Uh, I don't know. I don't recall. I think it was in the last book too, but in this one, you start every chapter with a haiku.
I did
And
exactly. Yeah,
you mentioned in the book that's a practice you've been doing for a while.
for sure. Yeah.
You went on a trip with a Japanese fellow. Is that how that started?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So Taku Hokoyama, he's a fellow I used to work with back in the MEC days when I worked there. And again, Taku had never been on a canoe trip before, and I took him on a 75-day, 3,100-kilometer canoe trip from Winnipeg through northern Manitoba and Ontario, and ended up at the family cottage eventually. But Taku, he kind of brought a proper book with inks and calligraphy pens, and he would actually do a Japanese haiku every evening. And then so I wanted to kind of do the westernized or English version of that, which is a 5-syllable, 7-syllable, 5-syllable poem every evening to kind of capture the essence of the day or a moment of the day.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a fun thing if you're out there just running it through your head. Say you've just seen, like, I don't know, a herd of caribou, or if you've run a whitewater rapid, or I don't know, saw like in an amazing sunset, whatever it is, that kind of thing. And then you can kind of jog. How do I do a 5-7-5, 5-syllable, 7-syllable, 5-syllable poem to do this moment justice, and something you can kind of play with in your mind. So it's kind of like a fun practice out there to kind of almost reflect on that moment and write it down every day. So
I've been thinking about the haiku a lot because, obviously Japanese is a completely different language with its own
exactly.
cadence.
Yeah.
So their haikus are a 5-syllable 5, but in Japanese, right? 5-7-5.
More or less, I think. Yeah.
And so, part of me is like, what you do, or what, an English haiku is never gonna really. It's putting a language into a form that was meant for something else.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it still gives you some rules that you have to get creative with.
Exactly. It's like a little box you put yourself in, just like on a trip. On a trip, you have this is how much food you have. You have to get from here to this, location thousands of kilometers away, and everything you have is in the canoe with you. This is the box you put yourself in, and just make it work, right? So just like haiku, that 575 puts you in that little tight box, which is good. You're not Otherwise you're writing, reams and reams of poetry, and especially on a trip where time is of essence. That little 575 is a perfect this little nugget you can throw in. I basically would start every one of my journal entries. I do detailed journals every night before I fall asleep, and I always start with the haiku and then go into the journal after that. So
and going back to those journals must have been helpful when you're writing about, how you mentioned talking about your actual emotions in the moment. Like you'll record those in the journal, right? I'm
without if you don't do a detailed journal of some sort every day, and you want to write about it, it would be impossible. You wouldn't be able to authentically you can make up everything, but you couldn't authentically be true to what was happening on the journey without that kind of detailed narrative that you wrote down in the moment on that.
And is it like a one page, multiple pages for you generally?
Yeah, it depends on the day. So some days, if say usually you don't meet a lot of people on these journeys, but the people that you do meet make a big impact. So you might write in more detail about your conversation with this person, what they were doing, what your thoughts about. So it might be a few pages if you meet someone, or if it's a simple day where you just kind of moved quietly and efficiently across a big lake or whatever. There's less to kind of think about in detail, unless you have something going on in your head that you kind of had to get out, kind of thing. But otherwise, so some days it could be a page, some days it could be 5 pages in the journal.
Well, it's good advice for the, with the magazine. We get a lot of people trying to write about their trips for the magazine.
For sure, yeah.
And I mean, I have to do it too. And yeah, it's really good advice. Unless you're going to bang off the article the moment you get back from that trip.
Yeah.
That journal is your lifeline to getting a story that I'm going to want to buy off you.
Yeah, and I think it's also like good if you are journaling and you've got that kind of detailed dated journal. If you just almost put it away for a few minutes and come back to it, sometimes you'll get more perspective and ideas, and if you go right into it after the trip. So you still have that journal to hold all the ideas and thoughts, but then you can almost provide a bit more perspective and context once you've stepped away from the trip a bit and then gone back to it, I think. So
do you do that with your articles or with your book too? Like, I know given the time, I would prefer to do my however many drafts of a piece and then walk away from it for 2.5 weeks.
Sure.
And come back to it for a final go over. And I always surprise myself how much stuff I catch or want to change or fix. Is that similar for you with the writing?
Yeah, like if I'm doing like a magazine article, I usually do two like 3,500 word pieces for Explorer every year on some of my journeys, and those I'll kind of pick away at. So I'll write on it for probably put an hour or two in the mornings on it for a few days, then I'll step away from. Then I'll go back, read the whole thing, and I'll start to cut and edit, and then I'll have. And oftentimes, if I step away from it, I'll have another idea how to properly connect the beginning of the article to the end in more of a
sometimes I wake up and the first thing in the mind is how to fix that thing that you couldn't fix.
And you don't know how to do it unless you give yourself a day or two or a week away from it.
That's nice of those guys to give you 3,400 words. I'm always hacking your stuff down.
I know it's different. It depends on the. I mean, you guys do a great job, of course, too, and I think as editors, you guys do an amazing job, unparalleled. They just happen to have a bit more room for their features in their magazines.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. I find that a lot of people say, "Oh, people don't read anymore," but I think people either don't read, but then there's a huge segment of people that read heavily, right? And love a long form feature.
Yeah, some people are like, you have to tell them it's a 2-minute read. It's just 2 minutes. You can do it. Otherwise, other people like to kind of almost like settling into a book. It's almost like a good book. You almost like don't want it to end. You want to savor it if it's something that you're really into, right? So
yeah. How's the filmmaking been going? Are you still pumping out films after every trip, or?
I haven't for years, really. It's like, I think once, like I had a pretty good deal going for a few years with the CBC documentary channel. So I sold like 6 broadcast licenses to those guys, but that kind of all disappeared with streaming and everything like that. Is kind of, I have a couple of films out there like that are on like Prime and stuff like that, but you get like, I don't know, $3 a month or something like that. Literally, it's like nothing. It's just you get pennies in it, pennies for every or maybe half a penny for every time someone looks at it. So it's basically not even worth it. So the amount of time and effort that goes into shooting a film and then editing a film, you basically have to become a YouTuber and just start pumping out daily content. And I'm just not that kind of a person. So I just kind of focus now more on the writing and the photography. But Arturo, the guy I did the trip this summer, he put out a 2-part film on that trip this summer called Cream of the North. You can see it on YouTube. So that's my 2-part kind of 20-minute parts that kind of showcase that journey this summer. So that's I'm passing on the flame and the torch to other people to do trips to film the trips that I'm on rather than doing it myself. So
Yeah, perfect. Do you find people, I mean, you mentioned being out there canoeing and running into somebody that had watched one of your canoe movies. Do you find yourself getting recognized more and more often now as you're
No, not definitely not. I think I've definitely managed to maintain my obscurity, whether by on purpose or not. But yeah, I think I'm recognized more. I was back in the day, like I did a trip in 2012 in where I ended up I was in Nain in northern Labrador, and then 3 people in that town of Nain recognized me from a film I did called Mammalian, because they all had satellite TV, and it's like, Inuit focused subject in the north, and of course I watch it. And so I had 3 people recognize my kind of performance arty kind of snow leopard character from that film Mammalian in one little walkabout in this town. So I'm famous in Nain, or I was for that brief moment anyways. So
there you go.
But otherwise, no, definitely not. Definitely not like I'm not an influencer or whatever. It's a different game now for sure. And you really have to keep at it and create a certain kind of content that isn't my kind of thing. It's almost just all about, 15 seconds of sizzle. And that's what it is these days, right? So
it is an interesting world. I know everyone's like, you got to be doing video podcasts, and I'm like, well, it's not it's not as easy. Like, we can't just put a Zoom video up, right? It's got to be good.
Yeah.
But it happened. I was in the shopping mall in Vancouver with my kid, trying to get him some pants at the skateboard shop, and a guy said, "Hey, are you feet?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah." And he's like, "Oh, I was just listening to the Frank Wolf podcast you did on the drive down here from Squamish." And that was, the guy was psyched, and he had your first book, and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna talk to him. The new book's out. I'm gonna talk to him." So that kid was excited. He was into the first book.
That was a plant, actually. I knew you were coming to the store, and I set that kid up there for me. Yeah.
Good work. That's what it takes in this day.
That's what it takes. If you got to do.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the cream always rises to the top, and there's nothing wrong with just being a writer and a photographer.
I think it's whatever you're into, right? So I think if you don't want to be a YouTuber and it's not your thing, then just don't do it. There's other ways to get through it, right? So
is there still plans for a sort of hardcover, larger format book of photography with haikus in it, or we talked about that on the last one?
Yeah, it's something. Yeah, I think RMB would do it. I don't know who would buy it exactly, but that is something we've bounced around a bit, but it's not official yet. Maybe the next few years we'll see. I'll do a few more trips and a few more, give myself more.
Seems like a good project. Like, I mean, hopefully it never happens, but if you did get injured and you had some downtime,
it's true.
Right?
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah, that would
it's almost like I don't have enough time now to do, because the one thing about, almost like talked about, like, instead, if you're on a trip forever, it's almost like, one thing that is great about the downtime in between at home is you have time to actually assess and write and kind of create this kind of, media out of your journeys. But you need that time to do it as well, right? If you're always doing trips, because this year I basically was working Northern Lights season in Churchill, then I went right into the Darien Gap trip. Then 2 weeks later, I was doing another trip on Baffin with Johnny and Dave on Clyde River area. And then I did like 5 weeks with Arturo, so July, August, and then cottage time. And then I just worked bear season. And now I have a little bit of time, and now I'm going to Antarctica to kind of work down there for a couple months guiding. So it's not like I'm not giving myself time to really, do that sort of thing.
Up,
like you need this kind of like.
And when you say work bear season, you're just guiding like paddling trips down rivers to look at grizzly bears?
No, this is like in Churchill, it's kind of like the bears, all converging. You're just kind of literally, it's pretty relatively luxurious. You're in a tundra buggy, and you're just kind of doing interp, telling people why the bears are behaving like they are. You tell your own stories. For me, I've had a lot of experience with polar bears in the wild, and that kind of relates to their behavior up there as well. So yeah, you're just kind of like giving people a flavor of the town and showing them polar bears and the other wildlife up there. So it's kind of like it's like a tight little 5-6 week season that I work every year. So
sweet. Yeah, Canada's a good country for wildlife. I mean, Kenya has the big 7 or whatever, but the next most on the Flickr, they did a search for, images tagged to wildlife, and
Yeah,
Canada came second behind Kenya. Like big
sure,
wildlife.
sure.
Do you have a favorite animal that you always are more happy to see than the other animals?
Um, I think even though they're relatively common, I think my namesake, the wolf, is always cool to see in the wild, like a proper wolf in the wild, like the one that honorably rolled in my shit this summer, of course, was cool. But
That's your spirit
yeah,
wolf now,
yeah, that's my
right?
spirit
The
wolf.
shit wolf.
Me and that wolf are one.
You definitely
We
are.
combined into one, literally. And then, but yeah, wolves I think are really cool. I've seen wolves like I've seen a wolf clamp down on a caribou before. I've seen wolves drive like a moose and a calf to the point of a peninsula. So I've seen wolves in action and hunting and stuff like that, which is always incredible. So, but I mean, I like seeing all the animals. Like in the book, I talk about seeing a herd of 10,000 caribou on my birthday, just kind of serendipitously there they were, which is like an awe-inspiring sight. And then even just things like, a polar bear, especially when you're on the ground, in face to face in many ways, and I have been before with this like apex predator that kind of is a pure meat eater and it would have no problem, taking you down. They're still have their own personalities and all that they're to kill you, but you definitely have this kind of sense of awe when something that huge and big and powerful in its own, you're basically you're not in a tundra buggy, you're not protected in any way except for probably a shotgun,
Yeah.
which you don't want to use. So when you kind of in that kind of, you get that perspective that you're just part of the food chain. And anytime you see an animal like that, it's always very awe-inspiring for sure. Yeah.
So what's next? We're coming into the rainy season and the cold
Yeah.
season. What are your plans for the next few months?
Well, I'm gonna do my first. I've never been to Antarctica, so I'm actually working for
Right.
a company down there for a couple months in January and February, and then when I'm back from that, probably I'm looking at maybe doing a. I'm not don't have really firm plans for the summer, but there is for May or June. I'd like to do like a big circuit of the islands up in the Alaska Panhandle. I haven't been up there. I've done pretty much the whole BC coast, Haida Gwaii, Vancouver Island, the Inside Passage, outside islands, but haven't pushed up into those high upper Alaskan islands like Kodiak and stuff like that. That would be amazing to do. And then also I want to do a river journey up in the Northwest Territories and the Yukon, which would basically take me the Heart River and then down the Peel and then up the Rat River over the pass where the kind of the Mad Trapper escaped to, and then down the Porcupine to Old Crow. So could do a big kind of 1,200 kilometer circuit in that
Awesome.
whole zone, kind of the north west corner. I've never been up that part of the Mackenzie Mountains before, so that'd be kind of a really cool exploration I'd like to do as well.
Yeah, and I know, I mean, you talk about it in the book. We spoke about it last time, but maybe we'll go out on this for the young adventurers out there.
Mm-hmm.
You have seemed to always found a way for 30 years now to make it happen on kind of a dirtbag budget or
Yeah,
like.
yeah, for
So
sure. Yeah.
what do you have to say to the people that are like that say, I don't know how I could ever afford to do that, or I don't know how I could ever get the time, or like, what do you say to those people
Yeah,
that
I mean,
want to?
I think if you really want to do it, then you for sure can. I think it's the luxury of time is more important than money. The time is the thing. So if you can carve out like a month and have a really cool idea, you just got to look at it like, a weekend trip with a bit more food. And then the travel usually isn't too bad in terms of getting up to places, especially within Canada. That's the thing about doing things in Canada. You can get to like a major city like Yellowknife or Whitehorse or whatever for a couple $100 from Vancouver, for example. And then you're there. You're right on the doorstep to like a vast wilderness that goes forever in all directions, right? So, and once you get in there, you have a line or a vision. You just got to start moving forward, and that's it. I mean, and just figure out the food part. Carry more food. Like I've carried up to 50 days of food in a canoe, so there's definitely no problem in a canoe, for example, or in a sled. Towing a sled behind you, you can carry a couple weeks, 3 weeks of food easily. Doing these Arctic ski journeys, and it's not that complicated. Airplane points, basic kind of food. And if I'm away for 6 weeks, I actually spend less money overall than I do living in the city in a day-to-day
Yeah,
way. I'm not,
yeah.
everything's with me. I don't spend a dime, and it's all kind of right there. And very basic things like sponsorship or whatever are not too hard to get when it comes to just gear and that sort of thing. I usually don't get a lot of money, but it doesn't take a lot. And it's also like people say, you can next year or do it in 2 years for the rest of your life, and then you come to the end of your life and you haven't done it. It's like, if you want to do something, do it this summer. Why not? Don't wait until next summer, or do it this spring, or do it this winter. If you want to do a ski trip, it doesn't take much. Like, you can get it off the ground in a week if you really wanted to. So, but you have to give yourself that luxury of time, and then it kind of, once you start a trip, it just takes on a life of its own, and you just kind of, next thing you know, you're in it and it's happening. So
Awesome.
anyone can do it.
Anyone can do it. I don't know if anyone can write a book, but your new book's called Two Springs, One Summer. Look for that. And of course, your website, fwolf.ca. So we'll put those links in. But thanks so much for your time.
At Frank Wolf 70 for the Instagram, if they want to see that wolf rolling in my shit.
Oh,
too.
yeah. Well, I'm going to hit you up for some pictures, because
it's my first viral video. It's already 1.1 million views.
There you go. Congratulations. Who knew? You said you shit on a wolf. I do want to get the pictures of your feet too, for the
for sure,
reel that we make, because that's like, it's pretty savage what you're
walking
on.
Yeah. That's what happens sometimes. Yeah.
Frank, thanks so much for your time, man. I appreciate it as always.
Of course. Thanks, Pete. Have a great day.
And that's that. If you can, get down to your local bookstore and buy Two Springs, One Summer, because shopping local and independent is the best way to consume. And thank you to Frank for coming back on the show. Thanks also to Shirai Rules and Adrian Gendro for the voice work and the tunes we've been using since day one on this pod. And of course, thanks to you for listening. I haven't said it in a while, but you should know that this pod was recorded on the unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Big love and respect to them, their history, and to these lands. And good tidings to you as well, mountain lifers. Here's to a healthy, happy, and snowy holidays. Take care of each other out there, make good decisions, and please, leave the campsite or the Christmas party better than you found it.